10.3 radicals, multiplying and simplifying. Multiply things that are inside, multiply things that are outside. The square root of 3 times the square root of 5. Both of those are inside the root, so multiply square root of 15. 2 square root of 3 times 4 square root of 5. Multiply the numbers outside. 2 times 4 is 8. The square root of 3 times square root of 5, square root of 15. 2 square root of 3 times 2 square root of 3. Multiply the 2's outside. 2 times 2 is 4. Multiply the 3's inside. Square root of 3 times square root of 3 is square root of 9. The square root of 9 is 3, so 4 times 3 is 12. The square root of 5 times 4, you would write 4 square root of 5 because you can't actually multiply 4 times 5. 5 is inside, 4 is outside. So if you had the square root of 5 times 4, you have 4 square roots of 5. The square root of 2x times the square root of 5y. 2 times 5 is 10, and x times y. If you have the cube root of 5 times the cube root of 7, that would be the cube root of 35. Multiply your numbers. If you have the fourth roots, you can multiply also. As long as you have the same root, you can multiply, and the numbers are inside. Simplify. You can simplify when there's a perfect square in the root. A perfect square is a whole number times itself. Break down what is inside the root to what multiplies to that number. The first number needs to be a perfect square. Then take the square root of the perfect square. It goes outside because when you take the square root, it's just a regular number. The other number that is not a perfect square stays inside. For example, the square root of 18, we would use 9 times 2 equals 18 because we can take the square root of 9. When you take the square root of 9, it equals 3. The square root of 2, the 2 stays inside because it's not a square root. The square root of 75, you could break it down into 25 times 3 because the square root of 25 is a perfect square. It's a nice square root. When you take the square root of 25, you get 5. That comes outside. The 3 stays inside because it's not a nice square root. A number outside the square root means multiply. 2 times the square root of 50. We would break 50 down into 25 times 2 because it's a perfect square. The square root of 25 comes outside as 5. The 2 that was already outside means 2 times. So multiply 2 times 5 equals 10 square root of 2. The square root of 2 stays inside because it's not a nice square root. 3 times the square root of 8. Break down 8 into 4 times 2. The square root of 4 equals 2, and that comes outside. So what I've circled there, that square root of 4 equals the 2. The 3 that was already outside multiplies times the 2 that comes outside from the square root of 4. So 3 times 2 gives us 6, and the square root of 2 stays in because it's not a good square root. Okay, so simplify the square root of 20x. 20 becomes 4 times 5. The square root of 4 comes outside as 2. Square root of 4 equals 2. So we have 2 square root of 5x. Simplifying with variables in the root. The square root of 81x to the 4th equals 9x squared. The square root means what times itself equals what's inside there. It equals 9x squared because 9 times 9 equals 81, and x squared times x squared equals x to the 4th because you add exponents when you're multiplying. The square root of 25x to the 6th equals 5x cubed because 5 times 5 is 25. X cubed times x cubed is x to the 6th. because you add powers. Since you add powers when you multiply, you can take half of the exponent to figure out what that x cubed is. So when you look inside and you see x to the 6th, how can you know it's x to the 3rd? If you take half of 6, 6 divided by 2 equals 3, that's how you can figure out what your exponent is. Because we add powers. X to the 3 times x to the 3, we would say 3 plus 3 is 6. The square root of 49x to the 8th would equal 7x to the 4th. Because 7 times 7 is 49, x to the 4th times x to the 4th is x to the 8th. Because 4 plus 4 equals 8. Since you add powers when you multiply, you can take half of 8 equals 4. Okay, that's the same problem. The square root of 49x to the 8th is 7x to the 4th. Notice we're taking half of the exponent. What if the exponent is an odd number? If you take half of an odd number, it will be a decimal. What we do is break down the odd exponent into an exponent of 1 times the remaining exponent. The odd power would be broken down into the variable raised to a power that is 1 less than the problem, and then times the variable raised to an understood 1. Remember, when you multiply with exponents, you add powers. When you break down the 1 with an odd power, the 2 powers should add to the original power. Then take the square root of the exponent with an even number by taking half the exponent. Leave the variable with an exponent of 1 inside. Let's see some examples. Example 1, x to the 5th. 5 is an odd power. It doesn't divide by 2. Okay, so what we're going to split 5 into is 4 and 1. Okay, first off, why is it 4 and 1? Because 4 plus 1 is 5. You're going to always split it into 1 and then the rest. Okay, so the first number should be 1 less than 5. What's 1 less than 5? 4. So you split 5 into 4 and 1. Why do we do that? So that we can take the square root of the x to the 4th. When you take the square root of x to the 4th, you take half of 4, which is 2, and that comes outside. The x stays inside. Break down the x to the 5th into 4 and 1. 4 plus 1 is 5. Then take half of 4 equals 2, so that you get x squared outside. Okay, it's going to always be broken into 1 less than the original power and then 1. Example 2, x to the 9th. 9 is an odd power, so we're going to break it down into 8 and 1. Okay, you always break it down into the number right before and then 1, because 8 plus 1 equals 9. We do that so we can take the square root of x to the 8th. Okay, so you take half of 8 is x to the 4th. So the square root of x to the 8th is x to the 4th, and you have your leftover x. Example 3. The square root of x to the 10th times y to the 7th. Now, 10, the x to the 10 is an even power, so you don't have to do anything. But y is raised to an odd power. 7's an odd number. It doesn't divide by 2. Okay, we need it to divide by 2 so we can take half. So y to the 7th gets broken down into 6 and 1. 6 plus 1 is 7. So we're going to take the square root of x to the 10th. So we're going to take half. Half of 10 is 5. So we have x to the 5th outside. Now for the y to the 6th, half of 6 is 3, so we have y to the 3rd out front. And we still have that y left over inside the root. Okay, even powers are fine. Odd powers, you split it up into 1 and the leftovers. Example 4. 32, x to the 11th, y to the 12th. Now we have a number this time. We're going to split 32 down into a perfect square. 32 is 16 times 2. x to the 11. 11's an odd number, so split the x to the 11 into x to the 10 and a leftover x. 10 plus 1 makes 11. Y to the 12th. Y was already an even number, so it's fine. Okay, so I'm going to take the square root of individual things. The square root of 16 comes outside as 4. X to the 10th, for the letters, you take half. Half of 10 is 5. So I have x to the 5 outside. Y to the 12th, half of 12 is 6, so I have y to the 6th outside. Inside, what's left over? 2 and x. Multiplying and simplifying. We will combine the steps in the previous examples. Example 5. So we're going to multiply first. 5 times 10 is 50. X times x, x squared. Y times y squared is y to the 3rd. Add powers. Now we're going to split 50 into 25 times 2. X squared is an even power. Y cubed is an odd power, so the 3 gets split up into 2 and 1. Y to the 3 gets split up into y squared times y. Now I'm going to take those square roots. The square root of 25 equals 5. X squared and y squared. I'm going to take half of 2 is 1. So outside I have x to the 1, y to the 1. And what's left over inside is 2 and y. Example 6. The square root of 2x to the 7th times the square root of 12x to the 4th. So first multiply. 2 times 12 is 24. X to the 7 times x to the 4th. Add 7 plus 4, x to the 11. I'm going to split 24 into 4 times 6 because 4 is a perfect square. 11 is an odd number, so I'm going to split x to the 11 into x to the 10 times x. I'm going to take the square root of 4 equals 2. X to the 10th, take half of 10 is 5, so x to the 5th outside. 6 and x remain inside. That's the end.